two really big things to remember, and you probably will learn this at the MTC, but for the most part, the pronunciation is very akin to Spanish, especially with the vowels. You have a, e, I, o, u. With Hawaiian, or it's similar to Hawaiian and other like Pacific Ocean island languages in the fact that if there are two vowels right after each other, you're going to pronounce both of them. Like ma'ayo, ka'ayo, that kind of stuff. But the biggest thing that helped me myself to learn the language was, aside from talking to people, was I read the Book of Mormon in Cebuano out loud from the beginning to the end. And doing that, depending on how long, like your intervals of doing it, how long you do it in one sitting, can actually tire you out. Your throat kind of gets a little sore because it's very different, the way that it's pronounced and the way that the language is used. But doing it helps you out, it strengthens you, you learn vocabulary, you learn the way that they form their sentences, which is great to understand because it's a very different sentence format than we'd have in America with their English, or even with Spanish, or even with Tagalog. The other thing was thinking in the language. So it's very difficult. My trainer was Filipino, my follow-up trainer was Filipino. I didn't have an American as a companion until 4.5 months after I was in the Philippines. So I started just trying to think in the language. And even if you start off with horrible thoughts, like I'm hungry, or I'm tired, or even no, and yes, and that's all, it helps you with fluency, it helps you with the speed of your language, which is something when you're trying to keep up with someone else who talks a lot in Cebuano, like natives, because they talk a lot and they talk fast sometimes depending on the person. But it's just so much more effective in helping you to quickly learn the language than thinking of it in English, translating it in your head, and then trying to say it in the language. Because a lot of times when you're doing that, you're doing it word by word, so it comes out wrong. As opposed to you can even do this too, if you think of it in English, your overall message, then try to translate that. But I think personally it's more effective to just try to think in Cebuano. You're going to start off small with very few or very short thoughts, but as you build on that, it grows, and then you don't even have to think. It's just, there's a definite distinction and difference in your mind between English and Cebuano, and you can just switch between the two whenever you need to. And then you can just go off in the language. You don't even really need to think about it. So yeah, the pronunciation is like Spanish. Remember that. The emphasis, in Spanish they have accents that they put on different letters depending on the word. The emphasis in Cebuano is always going to be, let me remember, on the second to last syllable. The vowel of the second to last syllable. So if you have a word like ka'ayo, the emphasis is on the I, or the second syllable. So you say kaayo. If you change that word to kaayohan, the emphasis changes to the O, kaayohan. And it's the biggest thing that helps you with is just whenever you're learning new words, especially while you're reading, where to emphasize. And there are some exceptions to that rule, because there are like the same word pronounced differently means different things. But for the most part, that's how you're going to understand like a new word, how to pronounce it, if you're reading it. And the last thing would just be, you're probably going to learn this in the MTC too. You can practice it beforehand if you want to, but there's a letter in the Cebuano alphabet. NG is one letter. And it's very different from anything that we have in English, but Filipinos are going to ask you about it all the time, and they're going to ask you to use it in sentences and stuff, have you try to say stuff just to see how you pronounce it. Because the closest thing that we have like in English, and what my MTC teacher had me do to help practice it, is you say a phrase like, sing a song. And it's the NG sound there, but there's always a letter right after it. So you're going to say something like, sing a songa. And then you say that a bunch of times till you get used to it. You kind of mesh the words together. You take the S's off and you say, inga onga. And then after you're done that, however many times, you take off the I and the O and you just say nga. And then he had us do it too. I don't know if everyone did it, but I try to do it a lot, is just do that with all the different vowels, because there's going to be different words where you have to say that. So I say nga, ge, gi, ngo, ngu. It's not nga, nge, ngi. And that's a big deal because Filipinos have a difficult time understanding you when you don't say stuff right. Whether or not it's true, I'm not completely sure, but they will at least act like they do not if they actually do not understand you if you pronounce something slightly wrong. Even if the accent is on the wrong part of the word, or the emphasis is on the wrong part of the word. And if they know what you're trying to say because they told you to say it, but you say it wrong, they still kind of laugh at you and joke with you about it, because they're very critical, but they're also very they make a lot of jokes, and they're very it's not sarcastic, but that kind of thing. And it's going to impress any Filipino if they see some white person from America, or anyone who's from America that can say kangit-ngit like a Filipino would, instead of saying kangit-ngit or kanigit-nigit, anything like that.